So stay tuned for an awesome forum. Welcome, everyone. Sorry for that little technical glitch. We are so happy to have you here today. Really looking forward to sharing with our awesome candidates and our awesome monitors. So please stay tuned for a lovely forum to come. We're probably going to give it another 2 minutes or so, and then we'll be going. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey everyone, welcome to our Comptroller Candidate Forum. It's so great to see so many people out here tonight. We're really excited to have you here. And I want to just welcome the candidates and welcome all of you. My name is Mia Inoue. I'm one of the moderators of this forum. And I'm also one of the co-chairs of the Palestine Liberation Working Group of the Mid-Hudson Valley chapter of Democratic Socialists of America. I want to begin by thanking the two candidates who are with us tonight, Raj Goyle and Drew Warshaw. We invited the incumbent, Thomas DiNapoli, as well, but he unfortunately did not respond to any of our inquiries. But we're really grateful to have Mr. Goyle and Mr. Warshaw, or Raj and Drew, here speaking to voters about what the Comptroller is and about their approach to ethical investments. And I want to also thank the sponsors of this event. So this event, the main sponsor is Break the Bonds New York State, which is a coalition of organizations that are fighting to push New York State to divest from Israel bonds. But we also have a number of the organizations within the coalition signed on as co-sponsors: Jewish Voice for Peace Hudson Valley, JVP Albany, Mid-Hudson Valley, Democratic Socialists of America, Capital District, DSA, JVP New York City, JVP Syracuse, JVP Buffalo, and Buffalo DSA. And I want to just also say a little bit about the two organizations that are represented here, Jewish Voice for Peace and Democratic Socialists of America, and why we're here and why we care about this issue and this race. So Jewish Voice for Peace, or JVP, is the largest anti-Zionist organization in the world. JVP is working to change the relationship between the United States and Israel. And because JVP believes that the liberation of all peoples are intertwined, the issues that we're facing in New York as everyday New Yorkers are important to JVP and its larger mission. Democratic Socialists of America, or DSA, is the largest socialist organization in the United States. We understand the Palestinian struggle for liberation from the ongoing genocide and occupation as a crucial front in the struggle against U.S. imperialism and global capitalism. And we believe in the collective power of all working class people, from the river to the sea, from New York to Palestine. We're here tonight as part of the Break the Bonds campaign, which is, as I said, a statewide coalition whose goal is to end the practice of sinking the pension funds and tax dollars of New York State workers into Israel bonds. Israel bonds are unrestricted loans from individuals and institutions to the Israeli Treasury that help to sustain the Israeli state economy, including the Israeli military. The New York State Common Retirement Fund is the second largest holder of Israel bonds in the country, with over $360 million invested in these bonds. And the Comptroller is the sole arbiter of these funds. We believe that these holdings are both immoral and risky investments. Because we are dedicated to ridding the Common Retirement Fund of Israel bonds that fund an apartheid state that is currently committing a genocide, we are also concerned about intersecting issues related to the responsible investment of public funds. So we're here tonight because we want to learn from the candidates about how they will invest taxpayer dollars if elected, and we want to learn about how they will make this state more affordable, how they will protect public workers, how they will make government more transparent, along with many other issues that are important to New Yorkers. I'm going to pass it off to my co-moderator, Ali Merchant. Take it away, Ali.
Thank you, Mia. Hi, everyone. I'm Ali Almas Merchant. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a resident of New York State and a member of the Mid-Hudson Valley Democratic Socialists of America and a member of the Palestine Working Group. And I've also worked as a clinical psychologist for over 10 years in the state. And in learning more about the comptroller's role, I can imagine that my father would have been very happy if I had a job like this. And I'm glad for myself that I learned very early on that I was very terrible at maths, despite the blind faith my father had in my abilities. And today I'm actually really, really glad to know that there are competent and caring people willing to run for and manage our state's finances. As Mia also said earlier, Break the Bonds, New York State has decided to organize this forum because we recognize the important role of the comptroller. So other people think like me that somebody should be competent at this job. And we think that the public should know more about the candidates looking into holding this position. Our organizations have not made and will not make an endorsement in this race. And while we are asking probing questions, they should not be read as implying a preference for any candidate. So there are no favorites here. We want to educate the public about the role of the comptroller and why it's important to everyday New Yorkers. The role of the comptroller is to protect taxpayer funds by uncovering waste, fraud, and abuse, manage the state pension fund, administer the state retirement system, return millions in unclaimed funds, provide independent fiscal oversight on state, New York City, and local finances, provide technical assistance and train local government officials and school districts, review state contracts and payments, maintain the state's accounting system, and administer the state payroll. Once again, this is not a debate but we are looking to hear the candidates' views on a wide range of issues. Next slide. I want to make sure that I can introduce each of the candidates. Our first candidate here today is Raj Goyle, a former legislator and an ACLU attorney and entrepreneur who has spent his career taking on entrenched systems and winning. As a state representative, he knocked on 10,000 doors to defeat a Koch-backed Republican incumbent in a district that no Democrat had ever carried, and then later voted as a pro-labor, pro-choice, anti-NRA progressive. He later ran a spirited congressional campaign against Mike Pompeo. More recently, he founded Phone Free New York, helping secure passage of the nation's largest bell-to-bell cell phone ban in schools. And the next slide, please. Drew Warshaw is a lifelong New Yorker running for office for the first time after spending a career leading organizations across government, nonprofit, and private sectors, taking on entrenched challenges, and fighting for working families and vulnerable communities. For the last 5 years, Drew has taken on the affordable housing crisis as Chief Operating Officer and then as co-CEO of Enterprise Community Partners, the largest housing nonprofit in the country that has created and preserved more than 1 million affordable homes. He and his wife, Charlotte, live in Lower Manhattan with their 2 sons, Benjamin and Jacob. Next slide, please. So we're just going to go over some rules. We have about 50 minutes for prepared questions today, and then 15 minutes for audience questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes per question. Mr. Goyle will start, and then following that, we will have Drew jump in. A 20-second warning will not display, but will be heard. And then at some point, if you go over that time, our moderator, Zane, will jump in and ask us to stop. There will be no interrupting and no rebuttals. This is not a debate. We want to hear each of their views. And Raj Goyle will be the first to start on the question because he RSVP'd first. And then switch who goes first each time. So early bird gets the worm here and all that. Next slide, please. For the audiences, you will all be muted. The chat function has been disabled, as some have already noted. You can put in the questions through the Q&A that you have. If you have any tech issues, you can email btb@proton.me. If you need closed captions, you can use the CC option at the bottom of your screen. It is working. And at this time, we will also be reading, Mia and I will also be reading each of the questions we ask, but you will be able to read along in the chat if, like me, you're also a multimodal learner. So at this point, we're going to get off the share screen mode, and we'll spotlight Raj and Drew. I'm going to pass it on to Mia.
Great. Thank you, Ali, and thanks again, everyone, for being here. So as we said, part of the purpose of this forum is for us all to learn about this role that's important, but that a lot of people don't know very much about, the Office of the Comptroller. So I want to just begin by asking you each to please explain the role of the Comptroller and what opportunities you see for the Comptroller as the steward of New York's finances. And we'll begin with Raj, and you have 2 minutes to answer. Thanks.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much for the opportunity. I know there's nothing else going on in New York tonight, so I appreciate the timing on this, and really thank you to Break the Bonds, DSA, and JVP for hosting this. I'm very, very excited to be here. I'm running because we need better Democrats. We need Democrats who fight, who don't fold, and we need somebody who will be an affordability, the people's champion and the affordability watchdog. That's what I intend to be. For 20 years we've had this same comptroller who's thought of this role as a passive bookkeeper in Albany. We've been told that his office has to remain morally neutral while managing a nearly $300 billion pension fund, but it's a lie. This office is one of the most powerful financial and political offices in the country. And with the stroke of a pen, the comptroller decides where New York's money goes and where values our projects bring to the world. The true opportunity of this office is to transition New York from a state of passive complicity to active protection and advocacy for New Yorkers. Right now, the pension fund is being used to finance some of the worst harms of our time. Billions of dollars in checks to the fossil fuel giants burning our planet, tech companies like Palantir. I'm also not seeing the timer, so if you
That's okay. I'm
and
timing you.
okay, gotcha. And of course, foreign sovereign bonds that are bankrolling apartheid and genocide. I won't treat this office like it has been for the last 20 years. We'll put more money in your pockets. We will lower utility rates, cut Wall Street fees, build affordable housing, and yes, we will have a comptroller's office that reflects our values. I'm proud of the fact that I've been endorsed by Rabbi Abby Stein, by Ro Khanna, by Ali Najmi, by Pramila J. Paul, by Engage, by the Muslim Democratic Council, all of these organizations,
20
because I'm the only
seconds.
candidate. Sorry?
20 seconds.
Okay, thank you. I'm the only candidate in this race who's been unequivocally clear about the genocide from day one. I said it when I announced this campaign in December. I said it in front of several hundred people. The New York Post took me on January 1 because they said that I was calling this issue out, and I have. I've been consistent. I haven't waffled. I haven't
And stop.
flip-flopped. Thank you so very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Raj. And Drew, now I'll pass it to you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to Break the Bonds, to JVP, to DSA. Thanks to our moderators and the tech folks behind the scenes, and for the more than 142 people who decided to spend their Knicks pregame learning about the Comptroller's office. Grateful for that. This is one of the most powerful offices in the country, not just in New York. One person invests $300 billion. One person gets to audit anything that touches a tax dollar. One person can review all state contracts. One person gets to give $20 billion back to New Yorkers from the unclaimed fund in the middle of an affordability crisis. And the opportunity I see, and I give Mr. Goyle a lot of credit for seeing the same thing, and that's that after 20 years of the same, after 5 terms of the same person in the same seat, we can actually use every one of these tools in service of working New Yorkers and not Wall Street and not corporations and not foreign governments. And in doing so, we will fire the 664 bankers on Wall Street that Mr. DiNapoli pays $1 billion of taxpayer-funded fees to every single year. He has literally made them millionaires off of the backs of working New Yorkers and public school teachers. We can stop using New York tax dollars to fund a genocide in Gaza and Netanyahu's wars in Lebanon and Iran and the incursion in the West Bank. We can get out of fossil fuel companies that are not only killing a planet, but they're killing our pension fund. And we ran the numbers, and we published a report that took Mr. DiNapoli's
20
fiduciary
seconds.
argument head on. And in doing so, we can then invest in addressing the affordability crisis, particularly as I've centered in this campaign, the housing crisis. I proposed a $20 billion fund to create and preserve 200,000 homes, and importantly, paired that with a tenant-centered housing table, because tenants make up more than 50% of all households across the state and 70% right here in
Thanks.
New York City.
Thank you, Drew. Thanks so much. And I'm going to pass it to Ali for the next question.
Thank you, Mia. So I told you all that my dad would have wanted me to do this job, which I would have done badly. But what made you both decide to run for this job, and what experiences in your background make you the most qualified candidate for this job? And we're going to start with Drew right now. Your 2 minutes start now.
You need to unmute
You're
him.
muted.
You need to unmute yourself. I've asked you to unmute, Drew. Sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead. 20 minutes. Two
Okay,
minutes.
great. As I was just saying to myself, the cavalry is not coming. The cavalry is us. And I've never run for office before. I was running the largest affordable housing nonprofit in the country. And every year I was there, the housing crisis got worse. Every day we went to work, more than 1,100 housers all across the country trying to address the housing crisis, when the two things we needed more than anything else were power and money. And those are the two things that Mr. DiNapoli has been sitting on for the last 20 years. I started my career with Citizen Action fighting for campaign finance reform. I then took on the Bush administration to give undocumented New Yorkers access to a basic driver's license. This was 12 years before the green light law was eventually enacted in law. This was at a time when the current comptroller was fighting against the very thing we were trying to give undocumented immigrants. I then helped rebuild the World Trade Center when it was stuck after years of dysfunction and gridlock. I spent nearly a decade building solar farms all over the country, democratizing lower cost, cleaner energy to more than 400,000 homes. And for the last 5 years, as I mentioned, I ran this affordable housing nonprofit. I am not a politician. I have not run for other offices. I'm not a perennial runner for office. I am doing this because of this one particular job that has all this power and all this money. And we need to take both of those things and start using them for the New Yorkers without those two things.
Thank you, Drew. Raj?
Yeah, I'm running for this office because I'm the child of immigrants. I'm the first in my family born in this country. My American story began actually when my parents left Delhi and they landed in Rochester. In fact, I was there this weekend. I went to the house where my parents came to. It's an emotional visit. My first time my mother had been on a plane. And I'm running because she now lives across the street from me. She's a widow now. Lost my father. She's a grandmother of five. She delivered 5,000 babies. And she asked me a year and a half ago if she could be deported because of Trump's ICE agents, and if she could be denaturalized. And that's the level of fear we have in this country, where someone like my mother, who's the heart and soul of this country, is actually that fearful. So that is what we need to reform. And that is why, when I looked at what the Democratic Party need and what we need in this country, is the most sinful thing is wasted political power. When I think about the social change movements, my dream was to become a civil rights lawyer, which I successfully did, working at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, at the ACLU after 9/11, in the trenches, helping our brothers and sisters fight the Bush administration targeting us each and every day. I then also took that fight against the Bush administration's invasion of Iraq. And then I went back home to Kansas, which is a phrase very few people ever say, which is back to Kansas, which is where I was raised. And I took on one of the reddest districts in the country and won, whereas a progressive pro-choice legislator, because I could prove that our values could win in the hardest place in America. Then I built a successful technology company, rooting out corporate waste. So when I left law school, when I finished my education, I didn't go try to be an Albany insider. What I tried to do was fight for people, which is what I've done. And that is why from day one of this campaign, I talked about the fact that we must
20
divest
seconds.
from these foreign bonds and from the genocide that's happening in Gaza. And that has been a core conviction of mine that I've been consistent on from day one of this campaign. And that is why I'm very excited to run for this office, because I know that we can achieve this change and bring human rights to an office that has sorely lacked it.
Thank you so much, Raj. I'm going to pass it on to Mia, my moderator, for the next question.
Great. So we wanted to ask a broad question about investment strategy. What's your overall strategy for the investment of pension funds, and what would drive your financial decisions in this
Yeah,
role?
well, thank you. So
Um,
the easy part.
yeah, well, thank
Oh, sorry about that, man. So the easy answer to that, of course, is we want to return more money to the pension fund. Of course, we want bigger returns, and we can do that. The critique of what's happening now is that Tom DiNapoli says that you cannot have moral clarity with the fiduciary duty. On that, he is simply wrong. They are deeply intertwined. And for decades, Wall Street and Albany, of which Tom is highly intertwined with, millions of dollars of corporate campaign contributions. I've not taken a cent of APAC linked money. I'm the only one in this race who can say that. I haven't taken a cent of corporate PAC money. And these insiders have used this fiduciary duty as a shield to excuse their investing in war, cage detention facilities, environmental destruction. And in the debate that we had on New York One, Tom kept saying, and again, I think we should put up maybe a Where's Waldo. We really thought Tom would be here tonight. But the fact of the matter is he can't, because he can't defend this record. Where would he have been during the times of great moral crises in world history? The rise of big tobacco and slavery and the Holocaust. He would have said to actually make moral stances would have been too political, and he would have kept funding bad things. We know that fossil fuels, for example, are stranded assets. They're a terrible long-term financial bet. Again, our campaign broke the news about Palantir, and we have driven this message repeatedly. He took a $180 million investment in Palantir, made it almost $480 million, and claims that he can't do anything about it. That is just outrageous. We can act on our values, and I will. A fiduciary first strategy means we can stop chasing just short-term gains, and we can actually invest in New York's social infrastructure. We can build hundreds of thousands of affordable homes. We can invest in childcare. We can lower utility costs. We can do all of these things to protect the middle class and the pensioners while we reflect our values.
Great, thank you. And Drew, take it away.
Sure. So I think my investment strategy starts with firing 664 bankers. These are the Wall Street investment managers who have taken $1 billion of tax money every single year for the last 20 years to not even do their job. So I am the one candidate who literally will fire every last one of them, including 371 different private equity managers. I'm also the only candidate that actually ran the numbers and quantified the performance of the third largest investor in the United States. That stuff matters. And I exposed that his bankers, who he's made millionaires off of the backs of working New Yorkers, because we're the ones who fund the pension fund and public school teachers and firefighters. He has made them millionaires, and they haven't even done their job. They underperformed the market by 39%, and they cost taxpayers $60 billion of higher property taxes to fund that underperformance. And if we didn't do our job for 20 years, we'd be fired. And instead, these guys get made millionaires. So one thing I'm going to do, and one thing where I think there is a bit of disagreement, I will divest from the bankers. We don't need the Wall Street middlemen. We could literally cut all of them out. And then I will also invest, as I mentioned, in the largest affordable housing fund in the country. I think having that investment strategy is critical. And then what will we divest from? We will divest from the foreign sovereign bonds that are funding genocides and wars abroad, 6,000 miles away, and not, and I put out an op-ed just this morning, Mr. DiNapoli talks about the fiduciary case. Well, I think there's a moral case to get out of it. But if he wants to have the fiduciary argument, let's have that one too. And we will win that one as well. As I showed, the bonds that we have in there, they're the worst type possible. You're not even allowed to sell them. And for all of that risk that we're taking, we earn a measly 2.9% rate of return. We can get out of that stuff and start investing in New York communities.
Thank you. All right, Ali, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Mia. So an Israel bond, as was just said, is an investment directly in the Israeli treasury. When an Israel bond is purchased, the buyer is loaning a sum of money to the Israeli government that can be used for any purpose. The owner of the bond is then paid back with interest when it matures after a set period of time. Most of the over $360 million in Israel bonds currently held by the New York State Common Retirement Fund are not bought and sold on the public market, meaning they typically need to be held until they mature and cannot be divested early. Now, both of you have stated that it is your intent to stop investment in Israel bonds and potentially divest current holdings. So please explain your rationale for this decision and how you would accomplish this, the divestment piece, if elected. And we're going to start with Drew. Your 2 minutes start now.
Sure. Thank you, Ali. Well, in terms of the rationale, I've made that clear, both from a moral standpoint and a financial standpoint. To invest New York tax dollars 6,000 miles away into this war machine has got to stop. And I made the case earlier this spring after Passover, which is supposed to be a story about liberation and about freedom. And it's also a story about reckoning. And I think we need to do a lot more reckoning about the values that we place on New York's tax dollars and how we are investing those. But then I also, as I said this morning, made the financial argument as well. And as you pointed out, Ali, $368 million of New York's taxes are parked 6,000 miles away. And what we showed today for the first time is that 90% of all of those holdings are in a special kind of bond, a bond that you cannot sell until maturity. That's not a thing. That's not like a normal thing on Wall Street. That's like, and if you're going to take that total risk, which Mr. DiNapoli has done with 90% of the largest stake of any state in the country, if you're going to do that, then you must be getting some outsized return, right? Like surely he must be getting some huge double-digit return. He's not. We calculated it's only 2.9%. He's actually getting a higher yield on the liquid traded, the stuff you can actually trade, the 10% of the bonds that he bought, the kind of normal ones that you're allowed to sell, he's somehow getting a higher yield on that than the ones that you must hold to maturity. So I want to be very clear about this. I will not only not renew the bonds, I will sell the bonds. I will sell the 10% that the state owns, and I will sell the 90% and find a bilateral buyer to take this off our hands. We can, we should, and we will.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Drew. Raj, your 2 minutes start now.
Yeah, so again, I was when I announced my campaign. In fact, the New York Post broke the story, and I talked about the Israel bonds. And on December 13th, in front of a couple hundred people at the Working Families Party Forum, I called Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal, and I said I would divest the entire foreign bond portfolio of Tom DiNapoli's. I was the only candidate to say that at the time. Others talked about indexing the foreign bonds, which means you still keep them. And so it's very important to see how we've campaigned over this campaign cycle, because the consistency on a moral conviction is very, very important. And the bonds are very, very clear, which is Tom DiNapoli has politicized the pension fund. He says that he doesn't like to do politics in the pension fund, but what could be more political than in the entire world, of which are 200 plus countries, you would over-index and put the vast majority of it in the country, in the state of Israel? And that you would do so at a time when Moody's downgraded their bonds, and they're obviously not good financial returns and not good investments. And so, and specifically, I actually read the terms of the bonds. It was a 2-page PDF and went through them. And of course, they have made them so unusual and strange, but we can indeed find a swap for those holders of those bonds. We will, of course, not invest any more in those Israel bonds, and we will find a way to make sure that we get the state pension fund out of those bonds, and of course that we cancel the entire foreign bond portfolio in its entirety. And that is, I think, why I've been very honored to earn, again, the endorsements of Rabbi Avi Stein and so many people who have been involved in the fight and not on our dime, and to be involved in the fight against the genocide for many, many years. Not a Johnny come lately to this issue. And I have lost friends, I've lost financial donors, I've lost supporters, because I was proud to have a New York Post hit piece, which is again a rite of passage for all of us on this call. I'm the only one in this race who's had that on January 1. And I remember we got hit during Zoran's inaugural, and I had a tweet that said, "I'm doubling down. I stand by what I said, and Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal."
So I really appreciate both of your answers, and I couldn't agree with both of you more, but I'm sorry, I'm going to play dumb on this one because I really don't get it. What is, and I'm going to ask both of you, and you'll each have 30 seconds to respond. Drew, you called it a bilateral buyer. I don't understand that. And then Raj, I think you named it as a swap. So maybe we'll start with Drew, if you can just respond to, I still don't get how you would get rid of something you can't get rid of.
Yeah, sure. So you can if someone else wants the value of what you're selling. So you can do that. And whether you call it a swap, whether you find a bilateral buyer, that just means like another person. So instead of selling a bond like the other 10%, instead of selling the bond the normal way, because this is not a normal bond, which you'd sell on what's called the secondary market, where there's like tons of buyers and sellers, you do have to locate one or multiple who are interested in the value that you are holding. And then you can trade the bonds that you have for the value that they put on that. So that's basically it.
Thank you, Drew. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. So I would say, let me try to even make it more simple. A bond is a loan. We've loaned the Israeli government almost $500 million. And so the way it works is that typically, if you have a loan and you want to sell that loan, essentially there has to be two-way consent, and the person has to say, sure, you can sell this. In this case, if you looked at the terms which I read, the Israeli government essentially has said you cannot do that. And that's because, as I've learned historically, people really don't even want the money back. They're doing it really to sustain the state to stay in that investment. And so that's why we will find somebody who will actually, as you call it, a swap, that somebody will say, fine, I will take that return because it's a good return for that person, and we'll get it off our books and put it on their books, regardless of what the terms are with Israel, who we've loaned the money to.
Thank you, both of you, very much. I'm going to hand it off to Mia, who's going to get to the next question. Appreciate it.
Oh, great. That was really interesting. And I do actually just want to ask maybe one more quick follow-up on that. Just to clarify, because that's really like sort of the heart of this forum, one of the major things we wanted to ask you is about your position on Israel bonds. So are both of you committing to divest, like to try to sell these bonds?
Yes.
Okay, so you're committing to not invest further and also to divest the bonds that we currently have.
That's right. That's right. And I want to say just quickly that I've also stated, and again, did this clearly and consistently, and the only one in the race who can say that I would ditch the entire foreign bond portfolio itself. There are other countries that the state pension fund is in. Of course, I've talked openly about the genocide and about the war crimes that the state of Israel is committing. But of course, I believe that we should be investing all that money right here at home.
Okay. And Drew, did you want to make a 30-second?
Yeah, no,
follow-up?
I've been public on that as well. And I feel like I keep getting hit for not being consistent. So I just want to be clear on a couple things. One, I have been consistent since the first time I've been asked this question that I would divest from Israel bonds. That's one. And then two, it's hard to be what seems like I'm being attacked for inconsistency. When someone had political power, like Mr. Goyle, he voted with Republicans 80% of the time. He said he would reauthorize the Patriot Act, the founding document of the surveillance state. He said he would make English the official language of Kansas. Why? I have no idea. He said he would restrict abortion
would I have
access
an
and
opportunity to
gun
respond
control.
to this?
It's his own ad.
All right, here we go.
It's
All
his
right,
own
so we
ad.
said it was not a
here we
debate.
go.
We said it wasn't going to be a debate. It's a direct debate. Okay, so I'm going to give
But if we
Raj
want to talk about consistency,
Oh,
let's
no,
be consistent about
can,
that.
if
happily.
we can use the timer function, if our tech team could do the timer function, we'll just give Raj, we'll give you 30 seconds to respond to Drew.
Well, obviously, I was staying within the contours of the topic we are on, but of course, it's important. On December 13th, just to put the facts out there, obviously, Drew said he would index the bonds. No talk of genocide, no talk of war crimes whatsoever until we saw where the politics were going this spring. So those are just facts. Drew is a big supporter of all my campaigns in Kansas. I voted with Democrats 93% of the time. I was a strong progressive. That's why Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, the AFL-CIO, Planned Parenthood all endorsed me. And so I proved our progressive values there. I will continue to do it now.
Thank you
But
so
I
much.
appreciate it when we get back to it.
Okay. So we're going to move on to the next question, which is about another question of ethical investment that I think is related. New York State is passively invested in multiple index funds. Index funds reduce costs because they track a market benchmark, so they don't require paying a stockbroker. New York State's index fund strategy has included investments like Palantir, which supports ICE's operations and other forms of military violence by utilizing AI and highly private surveillance data. So, how would you both address ethical investment concerns when dealing with passive investments in index funds? And I guess since Raj, you just ended the last question, we'll begin with Drew.
Sure. A couple ways. One, I think you could start with a human rights framework. And this is something that is done all the time with massive European pension funds and some of the Canadian pension funds. There's no reason why we can't do it here in New York. And I think we could be a leader in that. So one is just having that framework in place and being very clear about the litmus test that every investment would have to pass. The second thing is, and I think Mr. DiNapoli has conflated this, and I think Mr. Goyle helpfully corrected him in the last debate. But an index fund does not mean you must replicate every single thing in a given index, whether it's stocks or whether it's bonds. And Mr. DiNapoli pretended like you had to replicate all 500 stocks in the S&P 500, let's say. When Mr. Goyle and I were saying, well, we would take Palantir out of that. And he was like, well, that can't happen. Well, you can. So for one, there are index funds for everyday investors that are available with those types of screens in place. So you don't have to invest your money in Palantir if you still want to have access to a diversified portfolio. But even better, the state can actually use its own resources to build its own indexes so that we don't have to include fossil fuels, which are not just killing the planet, but killing the pension fund. We don't have to include these foreign bonds. We don't have to include Palantir, but we can still get access to the value of diversification, which is a real thing. That's important, and we should have that. But we aren't required just because we want a low-cost index-like investment to invest in the stuff that is killing people, our planet, and our pension fund.
Thank you so much. I'll pass it to Raj.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question, and of course, as Drew mentioned, Tom DiNapoli just simply doesn't understand how these investments work. And you can indeed have custom index funds. That's a very simple thing. We talked about that in the debate on New York One, and I think it's really important if we drill a little deep into. I mentioned it before, but let me lift it up again, which is so Tom DiNapoli runs this pension fund, and last year at the height of ICE's reign of terror, he puts about 1 million shares. He buys about 1 million shares of Palantir. Just a few months later, he goes to 2.5 million shares, and he claims that he has no power to change that when his active managers actually did it. It is one of the greatest, and unfortunately, we have a media environment in which it hasn't been able to properly scrutinize this record. It just manifestly strange that the head of the New York State Pension Fund doesn't understand this very simple concept. And moreover, he invests personally in index funds that have Palantir in them. And so he just doesn't seem to understand the power that he has, which is, of course, a theme around the entire way that he's run this office. So a human rights screen, I could call it a fiduciary first index. We can do those things. And I think there's something that also hasn't been mentioned, which is the sheer power of shareholder authority. I think people understand that when you own stock, you have the power to stand up and do resolutions to talk about that company. The $300 billion pension fund that Tom DiNapoli runs could have an enormous influence on BlackRock and Vanguard, these huge allocators of trillions of dollars of capital. So an example is Elon Musk right now is running roughshod over the markets with SpaceX. He has manipulated, with the Trump administration's tacit agreement, the indices so that we have forfeited very important investor protections. Tom DiNapoli is AWOL on that fight. This is the exact way that when even if you passively invest, you should be using the bully pulpit and using your power to reform corporate bad behavior.
Great. Thank you both. I'm going to pass it back to Ali.
Thank you, Mia. So In 2020, the Comptroller's office set a goal for transitioning the common retirement fund investment portfolio to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. If elected, what immediate steps would you take around climate? And what is your longer term vision for climate conscious investments? And we're going to start with Drew. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Yeah, sure. Well, one, if you go to drewwarshaw.com, you'll see the report that we put out. I think it was in January, on the fiduciary case for divesting from fossil fuels. Now, I spent 8 years in the renewable energy sector, building solar farms all across the country. I obviously believe in the moral case and the social case, having spent nearly a decade fighting against climate change. But there's also a financial reason to do it. They are losers. They are financial losers, and we should get out. So I would get out, as I pledged, within the first year of being in office. There is no position that can't be unwound within 1 year. I don't know why he keeps talking about the 2030s and the 2040s and all that stuff. And the other thing I want to make clear, because I think this is really, really important. He talks about wanting to have a seat at the table. Okay. And that's like why he still owns Exxon. And that's why he said, so basically what he's saying is your core business model is so risky that I'm going to ask you to completely change it. Right. And one, he hasn't come close to doing that. So it's failed miserably. We've had a couple of decades trying that. It hasn't worked. It won't work. You're not going to convince Exxon to stop doing the core thing that they've been doing forever. And the second thing that I would challenge Mr. DiNapoli on is if you believe it is so risky that those managers have to literally change the core thing that makes them money, then why on earth are you putting New York tax dollars at risk in that risky thing? Why are you waiting until the 2030s to get out of it? Why did you only get out of your active positions and left your passive positions, which, as Raj and I just talked about, you can get out if you wanted to? So to me, even if you buy the idea that he's protecting fiduciary, this is the opposite of fiduciary duty. He's admitted that it is too risky to be invested in these, that they have to completely change their business model. If he's admitted that, then why does he still own it?
Thank you so much, Drew. I'm going to pass it on to Raj.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very basic point. In fact, some of you may know that I was arrested in Albany in March because I protested the rollback of the CLCPA. And unfortunately, the legislature and the governor did roll that back. And so we have these important goals, but we're rolling them back because we don't have a political will to enforce obvious things that protect the planet and protect the pension fund. There's no reason to wait as long as he claims he needs to. And of course, we right now, Tom has billions of dollars in these destructive companies. And he's frankly, and I don't think this has been said yet, has reneged on a promise he made to the climate awareness and the climate activist world. And I will say on day one of my campaign, I made this commitment on fossil fuel divestment. It's one of the main reasons why New York Communities for Change endorsed my campaign. And we will on day one launch beginning the systematic divestment from all fossil fuel companies, pipeline developers, and it may take some time. The New York City Pension Fund did it, I believe, over the time of about 4 years. Need to be prudent about it. But what you can do is you can do it quickly, and you just have to do it with political will. And the key is what you can do is also make sure that we're investing in the clean technologies of the future. One of the things that has gotten very little media attention is that New York City is becoming a cluster, and the New York area generally, around what's called deep technology, which is like very transformative technologies around space exploration, around the way that we can generate power. And the state comptroller should be leading these sorts of like energy, these sorts of investments, because that's the way that you chart the future. Instead, Tom DiNapoli's stuck in yesterday. He's been a politician for 53 years, longer than I've been alive. I turn 51 tomorrow. I know I don't look a day over 50. But the thing is, what we can do is if we actually had a foot forward comptroller, we can not only make sure that we divest from fossil fuels, but we can invest in the companies of the future.
Thank you so much, Raj. I'm going to pass it to Mia.
First of all, happy birthday. And secondly, we got a little mixed up with the switching. So the
No
next
problem.
two questions, Raj will begin. And so our next question is about transparency and accountability. If elected as comptroller, how will you ensure that your decisions and your work are transparent and accountable to both members of the New York State and local retirement system, and also to all of your constituents, the people of New York State?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. This one really, I mean, all of these make me very passionate, but this one really is sort of in the heart of the beast. My company was a transparency company. I cannot imagine that $300 billion is allowed to operate with such opaqueness in the shadows, behind the scenes. And the Albany insiders, the reason why nobody knows about this job and this position is because the Albany insiders want it that way. They don't want you to realize that actually we could have such people power, that we could fight the affordability crisis, that we could fight Donald Trump, that we could actually be transparent about where these dollars are going. They don't want that. And so I have proposed and I've talked about the fact that we will have a security dashboard in which every New Yorker and every person can be able to see in real time exactly the stocks and bonds and PE funds, asset managers that are holding that have allocations from the pension fund. We don't need to wait for annual reports and hard PDFs. And of course, we will be cleaning out many of those investments. But whatever we invest in, it should be clear and it should be transparent. And remember that we also need to talk about the pay to play culture that is enveloped around that is consume this office. Remember that Tom DiNapoli was appointed because his predecessor was arrested and actually was criminally convicted. And so right now, it was broken news that broke in the last few weeks. Tom DiNapoli takes $500,000 in campaign contributions from law firms that he gives $1 million contracts to. Very sweet, very lucrative contracts. And he takes campaign contributions as a clear pay to play. And we just learned last week that he took an all expense paid trip to Israel, sponsored by the organization that helps facilitate the Israel bonds. So the ethics policy is so very, very important, and we should be transparent about every dollar that we are spending of public money. We should be transparent about how campaigns are funded, of course. And I've also pledged to put my personal assets into a blind trust. Right now, Tom DiNapoli trades individual stocks, and most of them are stocks that the pension fund invests in. We can do much better.
Thank you. Drew?
I love this question because we've been talking a lot about what we would do. I think this is a question about how we would do it. And I think really critically, what I would love to see this office become is truly an office for actual New Yorkers. And so I've been talking to movement organizations throughout this campaign. I've been endorsed by a bunch of community-based organizations, and I've been blessed to have their support. I want to take those organizations with me to the Comptroller's office. I want us to take the power and to take that money and to use it for those New Yorkers who don't have that. We have that opportunity here. And so I'll just give you a concrete example of what I mean. So I have proposed a $20 billion investment in homes that New Yorkers can actually afford, the single largest affordable housing investment in the United States of America. I think it would be an unlock for pension funds all over the country to be forced to do the same thing. But what did I do? I paired that investment with a tenant-centered housing table. Because right from the beginning, not just in a report later down the road after we've made these investments, we should have tenants and we should have the stakeholders at the table that inform the decision on where this money goes and who it is invested with. The other thing that I would just say, just generally, is I want input from New Yorkers and these movement organizations on not just what we audit, but literally how we audit. So I don't know in every question that I should be asking in terms of all the government programs out there and all state and local spending. But you know who does? The people who are most impacted by it, the people in our communities. So I want to go to them and have a system of asking them, what should we ask? What should the questions be? Because they will have oftentimes an even better sense than the 3,000 auditors who work for the state controller's office. So I think we have an incredible opportunity, not just from the what, but the how we do this job.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you. I'm going to pass it back to Ali. for our next question.
Thank you so much, Mia. This question is actually really important to me personally, and I think to many of us here. It's around affordability. So I really want to know, how do you plan to protect working class New Yorkers during a time of rising cost of living, making it more and more difficult to survive? In what ways, if any, would you use your position as comptroller to help New Yorkers with affordability issues such as housing, healthcare, childcare, education, issues almost all of us are struggling with and trying to figure out how to navigate today? So we'll start with Raj.
The affordability crisis that's choking New York families, I mean, it's not an accident. I mean, let's think about it. If you think that the solution to this problem is someone who's been in political office for 53 years and has been in Albany for 40 years, then again, I'd say be my guest. I think it's because we do have an insider culture that is so divorced from the reality of what's happening on the ground. And this office is the living embodiment of that completely, in which Tom DiNapoli said over and over that it's not his job. He doesn't believe it's his job to help people live in better homes, to lower utility bills. I couldn't disagree more. I mean, let's start with utilities, which is the one that I've talked about the most, and I've laid out a very comprehensive plan. I'm focusing like a laser on lowering those utility rates. So there's a small but very powerful agency in Albany called the Public Service Commission. Tom DiNapoli has never comprehensively audited it. It could be, and that is the way you open the books of the public utility companies. Let's step back and think about what Con Ed is. It's a public utility. It is supposed to take energy from the earth, give it to as many people as possible for as cheap a unit cost as possible. Instead, we have a Wall Street jazzed up Frankenstein, a CEO making $20 million a year, record number of shutoffs. I was in Syracuse over the weekend, and National Grid has had a record number of people cut off from basic electricity because of lack of being able to pay. So I will absolutely focus on that. We will also focus on AI data centers. I ran a technology company. I love innovation, but I am a citizen first and a dad first. That's also why I was able to get the cell phone ban through in public schools, because I've taken on big tech. I support the moratorium strongly for AI data centers and making sure that we don't subsidize these tech oligarchs on our backs. We should, of course, build hundreds of thousands of affordable homes all across the state and use the audit power on childcare. I've been heavily involved in the fight for universal childcare. We could, in fact, invest in certain childcare facilities if the ROI was good for the pension fund, but the audit power is so massive, we should document the cost of not having universal childcare to our economy and to our business community. I will do those things.
Thank you so much, Raj. I'm going to pass it on to Drew.
Yeah, this is such an important question. Let's talk about electricity. Let's just start with that. We absolutely totally agree with Mr. Goyle. We absolutely need to audit the Public Service Commission, the regulator of these utility monopolies. These monopolies only work, they're only so good as they are regulated. The regulator is the one thing that's standing between ratepayers and between these utility monopolies. One thing, though, I don't understand is why Mr. Goyle's 5-point plan does not include lowering the profit margin of these utility monopolies. These utility monopolies get approved by the state, a profit margin, a guaranteed rate of return of 9.5% to a monopoly where you have no choice but to choose them. So this is not a risky asset. And yet the state Public Service Commission gives them a 9.5% rate of return. We're going to call them on that, because we will be the third largest investor in the United States. And we don't need to earn 9.5% on a practically riskless asset. We could earn 8%. We could earn 7%. All of those numbers are higher than the target rate of return of 5.9%. And we are going to lower their profit margin, because fundamentally that is at the core of these utility models' broken business model. They are literally paid nearly 10% to spend money on literally anything. And that is why these utilities are lighting our money on fire. And then, on housing, I think it's really important. Mr. DiNapoli calls housing a pet project. Mr. Goyle just said, well, of course we should invest in housing. No. We need a specific plan. This is the most important issue in the state of New York. New Yorkers cannot afford a decent, safe place to live. I am the only candidate, incredibly, I can't even understand this, that sees the power of this office to actually address the housing crisis. And again, here, I think similar to my utility plan, because I actually have experience, I can actually do something about this. Because I have experience in affordable housing, I have proposed an actual housing plan that will address this crisis.
Thank you both. Both of you opened the pathway for this, so I'm going off book for a sec. I will start with Raj. You each have 30 seconds to respond to this, but I'm actually curious about your views on public utilities. We have a plan for and have put forth the idea for the Hudson Valley Power Authority here in the Hudson Valley. I'd be very curious to know where you stand on that, what you think about it, what each of you thinks about it. So we'll start with Raj, and you have 30 seconds each.
Sure. No, I'm quite familiar and I strongly support these ideas. We need to utterly rethink the concept of the public utility. They were granted a monopoly in the first place to actually have a right because they were given that monopoly to do the right thing and to distribute power. They've now lost their way. As I said, they become these Wall Street Frankensteins. And with all due respect to Drew, of course, we talked about the rate of return and we did so very clearly and we talked very openly about that. It's an obvious fix, which is, utility companies trade at 2x book value. It's the only industry in the world where you're paid to decorate your office. So, Ali, just very quickly, I support that concept of we should absolutely rethink our model of public utilities, make sure that they are in fact community owned as much as possible, and get them out of this Wall Street fuzzy math and this financial engineering that's hurt us all.
Thank you so much, Raj. Drew?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Ali. And I had personal experience dealing with Central Hudson Gas and Electric. I mean, this is like one of the worst run businesses in the United States of America. And we were trying to plug in our solar farms, our community solar farms, to give lower cost power than the utilities would offer it, and clean power to a bunch of people who couldn't necessarily put solar panels on their roof because their roof faced north instead of south, or because they had a tree they didn't want to cut down or whatever. So I have personal experience in this, which is what is informing these policies. And that's why I think they're actionable and we can actually do something about these issues, including on housing, which again, I have experience in as well.
Thank you so much, both of you. We're going to pass it now to the questions moderator, Derek, who's going to ask you some audience questions. So we're going to get him here very quickly. There he is, Derek Seidman.
Hi, thank you. My name is Derek Seidman, and I am a member of the New York State Break the Bonds Coalition and a member of Jewish Voice for Peace Buffalo. And thank you. And thanks to everyone who submitted questions in the Q&A and also at the time of registration. We've gathered some questions from participants. And our first question is, as state comptroller, would you invest retirement funds in companies that run data centers? And I think that question is for you, Mr. Goyle.
Sure. So it's a great question. And, we started, I think we were certainly the first candidate to talk about data centers way back in November. In fact, we're, I think, ahead of the curve generally. I support the moratorium on data centers very strongly. These are taking up very precious environmental resources, and they don't really create that many jobs. And so I think it is a very fair point to make sure that if data centers should be held back from the pension fund, be very much open to that. And moreover, the point is on energy itself. And, as I said, as the first candidate to call for divestment from fossil fuels in this campaign and from the pension fund, and the data center topic, I think, is one that is a great metaphor for how we should use this office generally. If you think about what happened with Uber and with taxis, there was obviously a huge demand for ride sharing. And there was a market failure for the fact that that's when, remember, we had outer borough cabs and so on here in New York City. But what we did is that we rushed into a technology and we did not put any guardrails around it. And in the process, we destroyed middle-class drivers' lives. We had driver suicide. We had all this debt, and that we're still dealing with the aftermath. And so the concept of what we should do is AI more generally must be talked about. Tom DiNapoli doesn't use a computer. He has his assistant print his emails out for him. And here we have this crisis of AI that's affecting jobs everywhere, and we don't have a political class that's actually able to confront it and talk about it. So we need to put guardrails in place. Data centers are a huge part of that discussion to make sure that we do not destroy jobs, that we don't have an ethical quagmire, which can happen. I'm actually proud. I was again proud to be in the vanguard and help lead the passage of the cell phone ban in public schools. We now have New York State just passed a regulation against chatbots, against social media algorithms. New York State has become a leader in fighting big tech, and the state comptroller's office is absolutely AWOL from that fight. And when I'm there, because I'm a technology CEO, I will be based on my experience able to help lead that fight nationally and internationally.
Thank you. And your 2 minutes, Mr. Warshaw.
Yeah, I don't think we need more tech CEOs. I think we have enough of them. The simple answer to your question is yes. We should not be investing in any more data centers. You know, I actually am reminded about what Dr. King said, just because I see him behind Raj. You know, he talked about, and this is back in the mid 60s, he talked about how the concern and the fear that our technological progress was outstripping our social progress. That you know, we were better at building bombs, and he even used the phrase computers back then, which is kind of remarkable thinking in the mid 60s, than we were about advancing the idea that we are our brother's keeper, the idea of agape, the idea of love. You know, not just a world of money and world of power, but about love, and not just the kinship love, but like the deep love, God's love, agape. And so I think like we gotta like call it a TV timeout here. And the idea that we are just rushing headlong blindly into an area of space where once again I fear that the technological progress is outstripping our moral progress and our social progress. And we have something to do about that in the Comptroller's office. We're the third largest investor in the United States. We have a say in whether that advances or it doesn't. And we have a leadership role to play here in New York, and we should use it.
Thank you, Mr. Warshaw. And the next question for you is, and there's been a few questions that have touched on this. And this is for you first, Mr. Warshaw. For the candidates committed to ethical investing, are you willing to work together to achieve your common goals, even if it means stepping aside and endorsing another candidate?
Well, look, absolutely. I think Raj would make a much better controller than our current incumbent, Mr. DiNapoli. He is running for a 6-term. 5 is long enough. So you know, certainly in that situation, I think Raj, you know, what I respect is he has been in the arena. I'm not sure I agree with all the things he's done once he's been in the arena, but I respect that he's tried. And the other thing is he understands, like we do, that there's all this power and all this money there, sitting there at a moment when we have never needed more power and we have never needed more money. And we've got to use every single tool at our disposal. I think Raj understands that. I know Mr. DiNapoli, he's had 20 years to prove that. We know he doesn't.
In your 2 minutes, Mr. Goyle?
Sure. Well, I'll return the favor, and I'll say I will only have to say, well, Drew, at one point you fully supported all that I did in the
That's
past.
before I knew your votes, Raj. Before I knew your votes.
One at a time, Drew. That you know, but I understand your political. I understand reading your political polls. But I think obviously Tom DiNapoli represents a very different era, a very different philosophy. And I will say, look, I've been proud to have led on this campaign. You know, again, since Drew took a little hit there, I'll say I'm glad you got to the position on, you know, and I've heard you now say the word genocide. I haven't heard that before. You know, and obviously it took you a long time to get to the position of calling out the morality of what's happening with Israel, and I think that's a good thing. And obviously, we would be, you know, there's far more that we agree on in terms of what that office should do. And perhaps we might disagree with some of the priorities and, of course, how we got there. But I think by and large, Tom DiNapoli and his leadership, or lack of leadership, I should say, is failing New York State. He's failing the affordability crisis. He's failing the fight against Donald Trump. And I would say, we do have to, talk about sort of the political reality. We obviously have 2 weeks to go in this campaign. And, I'm proud that we've raised, our campaign has raised it's pretty much as Tom DiNapoli, a 40-year incumbent, has. We've got a lot of energy out there. We've got a good field program. We have been the strongest candidate by far on social media and reach out there. So I think we're in a great position to topple Tom. But at the same time, to the spirit of the question, I would work with anybody, including, of course, Drew, who he and I have known each other for 25 years, to make sure that we do what's best for New York State. There's no question that that's the ultimate North Star here, and political rivalries and political expediency are always secondary to that.
Thank you. And Mr. Warshaw, we'll go back to you for another question. How do your personal financial investments in your campaign funding reflect your professional intentions when it comes to ethical investing?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of investments, we don't have many. We have one, and it's in a diversified, not surprisingly, a diversified index fund, because I think that is the way to invest. I think we need to cut out the Wall Street middlemen. And this is an index fund that screens out fossil fuel companies, and one that screens out Palantir. And that's all we're asking Mr. DiNapoli to do. So that's that. The second part of your question was in terms of campaign contributions. The issue that got me into politics in the first place, and I mentioned fighting with Citizen Action, was campaign finance reform. Started an organization called Democracy Matters that fought for public financing of campaigns back when that was very much not a thing, and now have been blessed to be in the first class of candidates to qualify for that public matching program. So I think the more public financing of campaigns, the better, the more that can crowd out the need for larger contributions. But in terms of the contributions that I've been given, I absolutely cannot be bought. And I do just want to clarify, because I saw a note that I think it was implied that I've taken either APAC or APAC adjacent money or anything like that. I just want to be very clear. We do not accept any money that comes from APAC, from corporations, or the like. So just wanted to be super clear on that.
Thank you. And your 2 minutes, Mr. Goyle?
Yeah, Derek, I'll make a few points. One is I've committed, and I don't think I've heard others do this, to put my financial investments in a blind trust. So therefore, I don't understand for the life of me how Tom DiNapoli continues to be invested in individual companies, and that those companies are also invested in by the pension fund. And so I think that's a clear conflict. And of course, we've talked about the fact that he's taken $500,000 in campaign contributions from law firms that he gives lucrative contracts to, took an all-expense paid trip to Israel by the organization that facilitates the Israel bonds themselves. So we obviously need to have a cleanup of the pay-to-play culture. And so it's very important that I think that I know that I will move to a blind trust. And I do think that there is an important issue out there, which is I have not taken any money from anybody. Of course, there's direct APAC contributions, and of course indirect APAC contributions, in which their donors support candidates. And I do believe I'm the only candidate who doesn't have any APAC linked contributions to my campaign. And of course, that would be consistent because I've been from day one the only candidate who has been consistently calling out the genocide in Gaza, and the fact that we have a morality to that issue. It is not something that can just sort of be, I think, poll tested. It wasn't something that was as I said, we took our slings and arrows for that. It cost us a lot in terms of people we thought were longtime friends, supporters, donors, and so on. But of course, happy to stick to my conviction. And I do think that when we talk about the ethics of the office, it is so vitally important to know that we can do so much better than we have right now. We have somebody who's taken millions of dollars of campaign of corporate cash from PACs, hundreds of thousands of dollars from APAC donors as well. We could do so much better, and we will when we have change on that office in 2 weeks.
Um, Thank you. And I guess, Drew, there were some things that were said there. Did you want to have a few seconds to?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. So we have another question, and maybe if you can respond in 45 seconds or so. Right now, what can be done from the comptroller position to reduce or halt New York State's financing of war and war profiteering through its pension fund investment? I'll ask you first, Mr. Goyle.
Sure. Well, of course, we've talked extensively about the Israel bonds, and so again, I was very, very clear in this campaign from day one that I would cancel those bonds. We've discussed that tonight, and then of course, if there are other companies that are violating the human rights screen that I think we've both talked about, those should easily be divested from. And of course, if there are private investments and the alternative, for there's investments that are publicly traded, like publicly traded stocks, and there's private investments in private companies, and so we should be examining all of these if there are human rights abuses that are happening because of investments of the pension fund, they should be stopped. It's period. It's very simple as that. Of course, Tom DiNapoli would disagree. He would say his hands are tied while he is, of course, just oiling the inside machine. So we'll change that when I'm elected.
Thank you. In your 2 minutes, Mr. Warshaw, or sorry, 45 seconds.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything Raj just said. So, honestly, nothing more to add. I think the human rights screen that I talked about earlier in the hour, divesting from these foreign bond programs that make no moral sense and they make no financial sense, as we've shown Mr. DiNapoli over and over and over again, despite his refusal to listen. So yeah, no, I think the good news is if someone named not Mr. DiNapoli is elected comptroller, I don't think you're going to have that problem.
Thank you so much. I'll send it back now to the other moderators for closing remarks.
Ali, I think this is you.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't have my video on. So I think we have about 2 minutes each for closing remarks from each of you. And as we had said, we would end with Drew. So we'll start with Raj for this one. You have 2 minutes, and then we'll end with Drew's closing remarks.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate everybody, and this has been a wonderful forum, and I'm excited to see so many folks. And let's go Knicks. I would say just in closing that this election is a fundamental choice about really the soul of our state. We can choose a 20-year incumbent to somebody who's been in Albany 40 years, who takes corporate cash, who takes APAC cash, who takes free foreign trips that fund a genocide, things doesn't try to do anything to get ICE out of New York, or we can actually elect somebody who will fight hard against the affordability crisis ravaging our state, and of course fight the Trump administration. I would say that I've been an independent civil rights watchdog my entire career. I've talked about the fact that I was at the ACLU, at the NAACP. I was in South Africa helping dismantle apartheid when Mandela was president. I served on the board of Planned Parenthood. I served on the board of Hunger Free America. I've been in the trenches on progressive and liberal and big reforms my entire career. And I'll say also very personally, I said this the other day, when you're the son of an immigrant, when you're the child of an immigrant, I should say, you uniquely understand the role that immigrants play. The immigrant is working too hard and sacrificing too much, doing too much heroic work, and by the time the third generation comes, it's too late. I can uniquely know what it's like to not know my grandparents because of the money and the time and the distance. I know what it's like when you have members of your family who are tempted to be deported or, in fact, even deported. And so it is that background. And yes, having run a successful company has taught me how rigged the system is. I saw what was happening, and that's what prompted me to fight and to use this office to fight corporate bad behavior. So if you actually want somebody who's been consistent throughout this campaign, who can reform this office and actually execute on a vision based on public service and time in the private sector and a vision for what New Yorkers can do together through the Comptroller's office, I'd humbly ask for your vote for Raj Goyle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raj, and happy birthday again. I'm going to pass
Thanks.
it on to Drew.
Great. Thanks so much again for hosting this and doing this. Just appreciated all the hugely substantive questions and the fact that so many people remained with us while the Knicks are about to tip off the game. Yeah, I mean, I do think consistency is really important, and I don't think there are a lot of DiNapoli votes on this call, and so you might be trying to decide who between the two of us who actually respected you enough to show up, you might vote for. And so I do think it's important that you look at our records. I do think it is important that you see what we did with political power when we had it and who we fought for. Because I am running for the family in Arbor Hill, just outside Albany, crowded in a one-bedroom apartment, while their comptroller invests in San Diego real estate, but not here in New York. I'm running for the Latino man in Oswego, detained by ICE in collusion with their own local police because their police department was never audited and continues to not be audited by their own comptroller who took $2 million from police PACs. For the family outside Rochester who's worried about that data center, funded with their own pension dollars that will increase their electricity bill from Rochester Gas and Electric. For the Palestinian family that I talked about in the last debate in Brooklyn who wonders how on earth their hard-earned tax dollars are going to buy Netanyahu's war bonds. And for the families everywhere that just want to be able to trust their leaders are working for them. That is who I'm running for. Because this should not be about any one person. This is about New Yorkers. This is about a moment where we have an opportunity to take power and to take money and to use those two things for the New Yorkers who do not have those two things. And if elected comptroller, if blessed with your vote, that is exactly what we will do.
Thank you so much, Drew, and thank you both of you. I'm going to pass it on to Mia now.
All right. Well, thanks to both of you. This has been a really interesting and informative, I think, really educational conversation. We really appreciate your being here and speaking to voters. I want to thank also the sponsors of this event, JVP Hudson Valley, JVP Albany, Mid-Hudson Valley DSA, Capital District DSA, JVP New York City, JVP Syracuse, JVP Buffalo, and Buffalo DSA. And I want to thank the audience for coming out tonight and for staying with us throughout this forum. This is a really important issue. We know a lot of you care about it deeply and appreciate your being here. Finally, I want to thank the team from Break the Bonds for helping to organize this forum. And I want to tell you guys before we sign off and turn on the Knicks, I want to tell you a little bit about ways that you can get involved with this campaign. So Break the Bonds is among many organizations in the state that are working to hold elected officials accountable and hold them to ethical standards that we know New Yorkers believe in. We have a number of things going on right now, and if you'd like to be part of this coalition, you can find us on Instagram, Break the Bonds NYS, which is up on the screen. If you haven't yet, there are two things that we'd like to ask you to sign. One is our petition to Tom DiNapoli to divest from Israel bonds, and maybe Khalid can drop that in the chat for everyone. That's for anyone to sign. Everyone on this call should sign it if you haven't yet. And then we have a second thing for you to sign, which is if you're a public worker. So if you work for the state of New York, we have a union sign-on letter that demands that no more money from the state pension be invested in Israel bonds. I think maybe Khalid could also drop that link in the chat. First one is for everyone. The second one is for public sector workers who want to demand that their pensions not be invested in Israel bonds. And then finally, if you're a concerned citizen, you can write a letter to the editor of your city or town newspaper about your opinion on Israel bond investments. And if you'd like to do that, we have a really comprehensive, really excellent letters to the editor toolkit. And you can just send a message to our Instagram account and we'll share that with you. And then lastly, before we sign off, please remember that early voting in the Democratic primary starts on June 13th, next week. And the primary election itself is on June 23rd. So please remember to go out and vote. And I think that is it for our forum. Thanks everyone for being here. And I hope this is just the first event in your very exciting New York themed evening. And go Knicks.
Go Knicks!
Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.